pending. Representative Issa wants some answers to this. He's the ranking member of the Oversight and Government Reform Committee. And, Congressman, you've got issues with the timing. What exactly are your concerns?
Well, first of all, Becky, I've got issues with that song. My mother played that Timey Kangaroo Down thing for so long that I just did not need to hear it again.
But on just to help you out with
you
that.
say it once and we'll play it again.
On a less light note, the SEC could have filed this 6 months ago. We could file it 6 months from now. And in this case, the SEC is like anybody else suing, saying something wasn't quite right under the rules and therefore there should be damages. So when you file it during the trading day, which is an exception to the rule, on the same trading day that a 151-page scathing report from the IG on their failure to file tough cases comes out, and you file it on the eve of the president doing his final push for this financial reform, it reeks of a political motive, and we just want to know which one of them that was the reason for their filing it on an unusual time, right on the eve of these two events.
You have requested additional information. You'd like to know what government employees or government elected officials had any talks with the SEC just before this was filed?
Absolutely, both internal and external. You know, the one thing we know is the American people don't trust government, and it's my job not to trust them either.
Is there a chance, though, that this had nothing to do with it, that this is simply a case of the SEC working very hard, trying to find some way to get their arms around some bad fallout on Wall Street and a lot of people who got the raw end of the deal on Main Street?
Becky, it's possible that Goldman will be found not guilty and owe no damages, but get no money back for the government going after him. Everything's possible. In this case, we're government oversight and reform. Our job is to ask when anomalies happen, why they happened, and whether they were wrong. So in this case, they're looking at Goldman. A court will decide whether Goldman did wrong and owes money, because this is a civil suit. It's our job to find out whether they were properly motivated, pick the timing properly, and we're not intending to interfere either with Congress in its actions, or even possibly just hide an IG report that came out the same day that said not only Bernie Madoff, but Stanford, we should not have lost that money had they done their job over the previous decade.
Congressman, what would you see? What do you need? And would there be a paper trail? What would you do? You ask for Rahm Emanuel's itinerary. You look at the emails. We know the E stands for evidence mails. Is it possible to find this out, or is it possible that you'd never know?
Well, first of all, when we ask these questions, we expect answers. If we get those answers and we never get any additional information other than denials, and let's say there's no email trail, then things go cold. But what often happens, as you know, is people deny, and then somebody presents something to show that that denial is not true. And ultimately, that's one of the best reasons that we deserve answers is you're on the record. It's a criminal offense to lie to Congress. It's a criminal offense, as Martha Stewart found out, just to lie about whether or not you knew something about a trade. That's really our job, is put people on the record, because this reeks of some motivation other than business as usual, particularly when they interfered with the trading day by putting it out just hours before the IG event and at a time in which, to be honest, the Democratic Party was able to profit by doing fundraising off of it. All three of those events need to be answered for the American people.
Congressman, do you have any evidence that is not yet public that would feed these suspicions, or do you know what we know?
Well, you know, I have to tell you that periodically at my home we have a problem with rodents. And generally I don't see them first, I smell them first. In this case, the timing, how they did it, when they did it, smells. And that's why we're asking. But it's why we ask every time we do something. We look at the IG's reports, we look at the actions, and we selectively ask when we think there's the best chance that something, in fact, was wrong. We asked about Angela Mazzillo again and again and Countrywide. Today we see that it did not only reeked, but out in the West Coast, there's probably going to be an indictment. That's part of our job, is to uncover and then hopefully let law enforcement and other organizations do their job if it's outside our purview.
Congressman, this is Robert Albertson. Broaden the timing issue for me. There seems somewhat artificial urgency in getting reform passed. And what I'm really puzzled about is, I have my own objections and issues. It seems to be going more after treating the crash than the cause. But there's a study going on to determine what went wrong and how to fix it. And you've been part of that process to get that going. Why all of a sudden is that study irrelevant and we got to get the bill done first?
Well, there was always pushback on the commission, and we did get it. We got it mostly because Congress was not willing to responsibly deal with all of the problems, including the impact of Freddie and Fannie and government regulation. And so you're absolutely right. We're not changing things which some people, myself included, believe were part of the problem and need to be part of the reform. And as you know, this bill is changing some things that probably don't need to be changed, or at least were not part of the crash.
Congressman, that Inspector General's report, as scathing as it is, and it is scathing, refers to conduct that basically ended in 2005. It happened on a previous administration's watch. Why do you think they would feel the need to cover it up with this lawsuit?
Well, one of the things that you have to know about the SEC is, in spite of the commissioners and so on, this is an organization driven by, if you will, bureaucratic investigations. They have had a long history from, in the case of that investigation that we're talking about, it began actually in the 90s, didn't get addressed time and time again because it was hard or for whatever other reasons. So what you had was 8 years of not doing their job under 2 administrations. And quite candidly, you don't see the tough prosecutions, the tough investigations, and the protections that the SEC is responsible for yet under this president's watch. So I think it's the bureaucrats more than the 5 appointed officials really who drive this question of, can we bury this?
Congressman, did you say the findings are not back yet on the causes of the crisis, or they are?
No, the commission is still at work.
Because the SEC sort of did the job for the commission. We now know what the cause of the crisis was. It was Goldman Sachs. And
yeah, it was one rogue. It wasn't AIGFP.
No, it wasn't the ratings
agency. It wasn't Freddie and Fannie, and it wasn't the rating agencies, which, by the way, rated these investments as AAA. So yeah, almost ask a question of why is it Moody's isn't just as much in the focus here for how could John Paulson know that these were actually bad mortgages and Moody's couldn't know?
But if you know, I don't know. If they're found where they're, you know, if the suit doesn't work, if they're found to not be liable, I guess I'm not going to say guilty or innocent. It'd be not liable.
Goldman,
right?
or the SEC?
Goldman.
Yep.
Like we know, the reputation probably doesn't come back, and that most people, 9 out of 10 on the street, are still going to. It's already been done. So the government had to think that this would be part of the equation, that the blame would be assigned to Goldman at that point.
Oh, absolutely. You're going to assign to these greedy people on Wall Street all of the blame, to the exclusion, to a great extent, of government's involvement. Look, I'm a Republican. I listened to President George W. Bush time and time again during this period of time brag about the highest level of home ownership. So at all levels of government, we were telling the American people there's no problem. Well, clearly there was a problem. There was a euphoria in a market that was unsustainable. Everyone should be willing to take their share of the blame. I'm a pilot, and I'll tell you, every time there's an airplane crash and the FAA's people come in, they don't just find that the pilot made error. They look at every element that led to the crash, and they publish it. We have the same obligation. Look at every element, find out which ones need to be changed, change those, but make sure people understand every element of a crash that, in fact, we do not want to have repeated in a macro or micro way. If Freddie and Fannie aren't reformed, there's no question we're back into inflating a market for affordable housing for the poor, while at the same time not dealing with the fact that as you inflate the market, the poor are worse off, not better off.
But it's so simple. I mean, he made $68 billion that one year. I mean, it's just it's much simpler.
Here's my question, Congressman.
Yeah, Carl.
For future reference, are regulators supposed to consult the congressional calendar to see what's on the Hill so they can avoid stepping on any tiptoes and having you come after them?
They didn't know there was financial...
I'm asking in the future.
No.
Should we look at what's going for markup?
They were blindsided
what's going up for debate?
They didn't even know financial regulatory reform was on the table.
First of all, they didn't have to consult the calendar. It was pretty obvious to the SEC what was going on because it's something they do follow. Second of all, they should have released it after the trading day at a minimum. And I guess last but not least, they should have asked the question of, have we done all of our homework before filing this civil suit? Having said that, look, I'm willing to give them the benefit of the doubt after they answer questions, But right now, there is a clear indication, a sniff in the air, a smell in the air, that this was politically timed, that in fact it's part of vilifying one group to the exclusion of looking at the overall problems that the American people want us to be responsible for. I personally consider myself responsible for not having done more during this euphoria period,
They only can
and
file
I think
one
everyone
suit at
should.
a time, right? I mean, how is it just because they've sued Goldman Sachs, why does it mean that they're not looking at everything else? This is one case. It's a big case, but it's one case.
Well, look, I'm not going to get into the details of Goldman. It doesn't look like it's a slam dunk, but on the other hand, there could be something there. We're looking at the timing of it. We're looking at, if nothing else, the question of why did you file it during the day? Was there any, if you will, more than coincidence that the IG was about to really say, look, these people don't take on hard cases, and lo and behold, here's a civil, not a criminal case being filed at a time when it's easy to vilify and probably get a settlement in many cases from big Wall Street firms.
All right, Congressman Issa, thank you very much for joining us, and please let us know what you hear back from this investigation.
Will do. Thank you.